Okay, everyone, we'll get started now. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the session today. I'm going to give you a quick walkthrough of the 14.5 webinar release, and we'll do this via this webinar. Just some quick details about this session. We're doing it via Google, obviously, for the first time. So just a few bits and pieces so you know how it all works. There's a Q&A button up there in the top right-hand corner, which allows you to ask questions. At the end of this session, I will go through those questions and answer any that I can that come up during the session. But during this walkthrough at the very beginning, I'll just go through everything that I think is important. And at the end, I will answer all those questions and we'll go through them one by one. Also, if you do have questions and you aren't watching this via Google, you can, of course, post them to Twitter. Sean's going to copy and paste those questions into Google for those people that are just on Twitter. Finally, we are recording this, and this will also be shared via YouTube once this webinar is complete, so anyone who's missed out can watch this as well. So it will be up on YouTube following this session. Just a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. We are going to go through the tiles component, calendar updates, homepage interface, changes, rubric editor, the custom grade types, and also the bulk modify of users, audio transcoding, new components, and some of the new question types that we have available as well. So I've got a lot to cover in this update. I'm going to try and quickly go through as much as possible so that then we can get on to any questions that people might have. So going straight into the system, I'm going to start off in the admin system because there's quite a lot of changes within the admin. I thought that's as good a place as anywhere to start today. Firstly, in the users section, one of the new features that we've added to allow you to manage your user population a much easier way is this new bulk modify feature. The bulk modify function allows you to edit your users en masse. So if, for example, you wanted to turn ePortfolios on for senior students in year 8, you can now do that by this process. So you can search for the students in year 8. It will bring through a list of all of those students for you to then tick on, and then you can set the changes that you want to make to those users. Just be aware, of course, with this, that if you do have a sync script modifying some of these attributes, they may get overwritten by the sync script overnight. But we do try and avoid changing a lot of these settings down here via the sync script, just so that you can control them manually if you need to. So just be aware, if you do find it reverting back, you might need to contact support in order to get your sync script updated as well. Moving on to the next area within the dashboard, we've got the dashboard changes here. Let's go into that for you. Within the dashboard, we've got the ability to obviously add now Twitter, video, and tiles to the dashboards. I'm going to come back to the Twitter, the tiles component specifically in a short while, but just so you know that those new components are now available. The image gallery and image slider are also available. The image slider is an interesting one. That's the one you would have seen on our home pages recently in our new demo system up here. So it allows you to create images that can be slid through with those little controls there, creating quite an interesting effect. And obviously below that, you can see tiles being used as well. Moving on to the next area, we have added video into the ePortfolio system. Now, by default, the default templates won't include the video component. So you'll actually need to go and add the video component to those templates in order for students to be able to access them. Any component that's not in a template will not be usable. So it needs to first be added to a template. However you set those templates up, you need to make sure that that component has been added onto the template, and then students will be able to access that component. Next up, we've got some new settings to go through. In the settings area, we have a few changes to the LMS policy settings. Just down the very bottom here, we now allow you to turn off and on the comments on the student grade card. So that's the comments that can be left on a student's grade card at the very bottom by teachers, students, and parents. If you do not want that feature enabled, you can turn that off via here. Below that, we have the default letter grade group, and I'll get to that in a moment, but that allows you to set what default grading system is used throughout the system. The other new feature that you'll find, and I'll just log out to show you, when you do log into the system, is there's now a new Remember Me function on the login screen. This has been added to every login screen. If you don't want that function, you can of course turn that off in the admin system. So we have a setting to control that and allow you to disable that feature if you choose. With the Remember Me, it will remember the user for 6 months after they tick that. On that, for 6 months after the ticking that box, that computer will just pass through the authentication process from that point forward. Obviously, that doesn't affect our customers that are using SAML, as they'll be using their own authentication login system. But for those still using the Schoolbox login screen, you'll need to know about how to disable that if you do not wish to use that feature. If you do, it's on by default. So just to point out where that is in the admin system, through security, just down the bottom of security, you'll find allow Remember Me, and you can turn that off there. Next up is the calendar admin options. The calendar's obviously been extended quite a lot in this update. There's been quite a lot of work done throughout the calendar. So in line with that, we've got a few new admin options. Under the subscribe area, you're going to find a few new configurable sections in subscribe. Firstly, there's a new area to enable the timetable. This will then automatically pull through timetable of that person into their timetable, into their calendar view. And days will show this, the calendar days for that particular campus for that user. If I click update on that, now when we look at a teacher's calendar, it will show as showing their particular timetable overlaid on their calendar. Also note here we have labels and event types. This allows you to control what event types these events come through as for filtering purposes. And you also can set a label. The label's used for filtering by source. You'll see here that we've labeled these two the same, timetable and timetable. That means they'll both share the same label. So when you go to filter on timetable, it will remove both of those at the same time. If you want to separate them, you can call them two different sources, and that will allow you to separate them individually into separate filters. The next feature for the admin system in the calendar is, of course, the cleanup. We've had many users over the years ask us for the ability to remove the calendar en masse after perhaps a failed load. They may want to clean up events in the future and re-bulk load them from a new data source. This mass cleanup allows you to select a date range and then select which events you want to delete from that date range. Obviously, it's got a select all as well, so you can just destroy all of the events within that date range if you choose. Moving on, next up is the new tab here called Grades. The Grades area now allows us to define any grade systems that we choose. So previously, we obviously only had a single grade system that you could use, which would have typically been an A+ system like you see here. Now you can add your own new systems. So we could have a satisfactory system, and that could just be on a lower bound of 0, not satisfactory, and 50, satisfactory. And you can keep adding new ones as well if you choose. So maybe traffic lights. These options will now be available when teachers create their new marking systems. When they select it for their assessments, they'll now be able to not only select from the default setting, but they'll also be able to select from any of these other additional marking systems as well. These can also be used for different marking systems across junior and senior, or perhaps even different marking systems across different, I guess, assessment systems like IB, VCE, HSC, all of those different things that use different marking scales, they can all be placed in here as well. So that if a school's got multiple marking scales, they can all be placed in here now with the appropriate groupings. Okay, that pretty much wraps up everything that's new within the admin system. I just might go back now and quickly visit and touch on the tiles system. So just to save that off. The new tiles system on the dashboard here. And I have to point out that there is a great video in depth about this already posted to our YouTube channel, so you can watch on exactly how to use that. But the new tiles component allows you to create tiles and modify the layout of those tiles. If I go to the modify layout page here now, the basic concept is either a grid or column layout. Grids are defined via their fixed width. Columns will set a series of columns. Obviously, it's responsive, so the layout will adjust to the size of the screen. With columns, they'll span and grow and shrink depending on the size of the screen. With a grid, it will wrap as many tiles that it can into the fixed width that you provide it with. We also provide these tile shapes that you can choose from depending on the layout of your icon or the size of your text or the image that you're using in your tile. You'll select an appropriate tile shape to go with that. This is across all of the tiles, so you can't currently have individual shapes per tile, but you are allowed to select the shape for all of the tiles. Of course, right at the very end, custom allows you to put in your own ratios. So if you need to put in anything special, you can put in whatever you like into here, and it will create your own custom ratio there. Finally, the ability to add that tile. With this, you obviously have the control over the text that will be shown on the tile, the color of the tile, the background color behind the text, obviously, the position of the text, whether it's going to be at the top of the tile or at the bottom of the tile, what link the tile will link to, and finally, the background when you hover over and things like that as well behind the text. Here you can obviously add the image, so if you want to drop an image in there, you can easily put an image into that tile. So that's about it for the tile system. I'm not going to go too far into that. Obviously, as I mentioned, there is a great video going through all of that on the YouTube channel already, so I recommend everyone watches that if they want to get more information on that feature. Okay, next we go into the calendar system. The calendar system here, we obviously did a lot of work in the calendar. We upgraded the system behind the calendar so that it can now use the latest features and functions. Specifically, we found that the update has fixed many of the printing issues that people have previously had. So printing of this timetable is now, or this calendar is now much better than it was in the past. I'm just going to have a look at a particular teacher, because obviously as an admin I don't have a timetable, but if I pull up my teacher's calendar, I can now see that the timetable is available in here. And if I look at the week view, it obviously looks a lot clearer. We can see here that we have the calendar and the timetable laid out in the one view, so I can see what's on for the day. I can also see where my subjects are laid out on that particular calendar as well. The other thing that we've added here is this new list view. Before I move on, before that, you'll notice this more link here. What we've done here to improve the readability of this view, instead of it dropping down very far and scrolling very down when there's lots of events on, you can now click on the event to see the full list pop out with that list of events that are on for that day. The list view, however, gives you a full list of everything that's on for a date range. Now, this is particularly useful if you're wanting to print out the calendar. It's particularly good, for example, for looking over a large date range. So if you wanted to find out what extracurricular activities are on for the rest of the year, you can select those dates, pull in that calendar for that particular date range. And then once that's done, you simply set the filters. It's taking a while to pull in my calendar for that size range. So if I wanted to select just the extracurricular, we've added these select all options in for you, so that's a new feature as well. So you can unselect all, select them all on, or select them off and then select a particular attribute, and then you'll see just those types of events. You'll also notice we talked about these sources earlier and the ones that you configured within the admin area. So this allows you to pull in just the particular events that you want to see. So we turn this back on again and we turn off events and we just show timetable days. You can now see we're just seeing the day numbers for each day of the year. So lots of features there in the calendar. Hopefully makes it easier for everyone to see what's on, print that data, and view it in different ways that might be more useful for planning purposes. Okay, moving on to my next set of changes. I'm going now into the home pages. So once again, we've done some fairly big improvements to the way home pages work. We used to have some components that used to float around the page, manage folder and manage class. We always found ourselves looking for those buttons and they were always hidden away somewhere. So as of this release, we now have this button up the top here that allows you to see all the options and all the folder management options directly in here. You'll always find this drop-down area in the top right-hand corner, so you'll always be able to find those links to those important features for the home page. I'm here looking at a home page and you'll see that it only has the folder actions. But if I was to look at a class page, such as my English 3-4 page here, you'll also note that it adds in the class actions automatically, so the class list and class mark sheet are directly available from here. In addition to updating these, we've also added into the view statistics area the ability to see the counts on how many times a user has visited this page. In this case, it's just me visiting the page over and over again, but you can see there that page has been visited 110 times. Some of the other things that we've added in is this new additional add components tool. So this was previously just text. We've now updated it to include images of each of the features. So each component has its own icon, so it's much prettier to look at and hopefully more visually memorable so that you can remember exactly what tools you want. Coming in here and looking at some of these new components that we have, we've obviously added a new Pinterest component, and we've also added the new tiles component as well that we talked about on the dashboards. This component is also available for your home pages, so just the same as what it was on the dashboard, you can use it in the home pages as well. Note that these are now also draggable, so I can pick up a tool and drag it into the location that I want directly, so I don't have to add it first and then drag it. I can just drop it into the correct location from the beginning. So they're all draggable now. Next along is the modify page column. So here we can see all of the attributes for changing the color and changing the column widths. Note that this has been simplified. You now have the simple colors here. Clicking on those will pop up the color picker. This is once again simplified again, so that it's a bit easier to understand what's happening and what color you're picking. Also note this now has the ability to, if you select all of these options simultaneously, you'll see they change to all yellow. I can now set the colors to be the same across all options in one go. So I can do any combination of those, turn them on and off, and change the colors for the whole page. This, I guess, removes the need to copy the colors across from left to right. You can now set them all at once. Next up, I wanted to just quickly show you the new question type that we have. I've created an excursion permission slip down here in the surveys module. This tool obviously allows us to create a quick quiz or survey, which then asks me, do I want to approve my child attending this event? Yes. And then the system will capture my signature. So I can just write into here. Put my signature in and click finish, and that then submits that form with the signature attached directly to the system. Obviously, be aware that in earlier updates, we enabled it so that those can be emailed to someone, so that those changes to that will automatically notify the person who's tracking it. And now we can see that 100% of people have said yes, and I can see all the viewer responses of the people who have responded to that survey. There's one other new question type that we've added, not particularly in the survey area, but actually in the quiz area. We added a new single answer question. This is just the same as multiple choice, but it doesn't allow multiple answers. It allows the student to select only one option. So just be aware that that single answer question has been added in as well. Now, I mentioned video on ePortfolio earlier. So now when I look at a student's ePortfolio, they can now add video directly to their components. So I added that into their templates before. And so if we're looking in here, you'll find that there's now a new component, and ePortfolios have been updated in much the same way. No, I didn't add my video. Oh well. You can see that these have all been updated to the same way. They have all the same features and functions that we had previously in the page view. One thing that I should point out as well is that up here, this little I button just that we're seeing here, this allows a teacher to actually switch and see what the system would look like as a student. If I click on that now, I can see that the page will change into the student view, removing the edit buttons and everything else. Pressing this button again allows me to switch back into the teacher view again. So if you've got teachers that are nervous about what the students are seeing, that little I button there will now allow them to view the page exactly as the students see it, so they can quickly check what the students are seeing on that page just to renew their confidence. Okay, next up is file handling. So as part of this system, we've added a whole lot of new ways to upload and handle files. So just looking at our image gallery here and also our resources files component, for example. Both these components here are now able to accept files being drag and dropped onto them. So if I just quickly pick up a file here and drag onto that space, you can see there my file drops in and automatically gets preloaded into the page and gets added into the page. So very easy to now add those images directly into the content. We've also got the ability to drop files in. So if you wanted to put a file up into the files area, that's fine as well. The image was a bit bigger. And you can see the progress of that upload. So it's clear to the user what's exactly happening while this is loading, even if it is quite a large file being uploaded at the moment. We also have the same support for other components, such as the video component and the almost all the components that allow files to be uploaded have got drag and drop now. You'll also find that when you post a file directly through here, there's a new file modal, which I'll get to just as soon as this is finished up. There we go, all done. Perfect. So if we click on post file now has this new draggable area. This area here, obviously you can drag a file directly into it if you choose, but you can also click on it to interact with it. If I do click on it, you'll see that it now opens up this modal area. This modal now gives us many more options for uploading files, and this same modal is used for student submissions and for all sorts of areas where files are being uploaded into the system. Traditionally, you could only upload from your computer. Obviously, this provides that same option there to upload directly from your computer and browse your computer as per normal. But it also gives you the ability to drag into it and select from any of our integrated systems. So here we have resources, which obviously gives you all of the Schoolbox file systems. So you can upload a file from the existing Schoolbox file system, basically a copy, I guess, in this case. From the My Files area, so if you've got files stored in your personal My Files area that you want to upload, say for example a student might have put the file in their My Files area, gone home, worked on it some more, and then they're saved it there and then they're uploading it later. That's a fine workflow as well. Drives allows you to upload files from any of our mounted WebDAV drives. So if your school has set up the Drives tab and you have WebDAV shares mounted in Schoolbox, users can now upload directly from WebDAV into Schoolbox, avoiding the need to have to download that file first and then uploading it again into Schoolbox. This allows you to go direct from WebDAV into Schoolbox. So if there's files in their home directory, their H drives, or any other shared network drives, perhaps teachers are storing their curriculum resources on a shared network drive, this will allow them post directly from that network drive into Schoolbox. Finally, the Google Drive option allows us to integrate into your existing Google Drive systems. So if you're a school that has Google Drive, we can obviously set up this integration so that you can post directly from Google Drive into Schoolbox. So that's a very useful feature if you're going with the Google technology. It will allow you to post any file direct from there. So if you've created in Google Docs, for example, save it and then post it via this system. We do expect that in the future this will be extended with other file supports as well. So obviously OneDrive is quickly going to be added in the near future. We're just pending some updates there from OneDrive for a finalized API for us to use on that. But expect early in next year for that OneDrive integration to be available as well. Obviously that opens up lots of new ways for working with Schoolbox and posting files to Schoolbox. The idea, I guess, in the future is that no longer will we have files stored on our local computers. We will be interacting with a range of different cloud services. And that file upload system is obviously the start of us supporting a whole lot of different cloud services and uploads from various different cloud services. One other thing that I just thought I'd mention before we finish up. An often requested feature is for us to keep a record of all emails sent via Schoolbox. Now, in this new update, if I was to search for a student and attempt to email this student, you'll now notice that the email has been set to BCC my own address in the BCC as well. So that now makes sure that the user who's sending the email also gets a copy. Previously, it used to send a copy only when you were sending to the class list or to the subject list or the teacher list, but now it also sends when you're just sending direct mail to people as well. So you'll find that BCC is always included. Obviously, the user can choose not to include it if they want to, they can remove it, but it's in there by default just to make sure that they do get a copy if they need to. Okay, so I guess that about sums up my quick run through of the system. I'll switch now to answering some questions. So if you've got any questions, now's a good time to post them. I'll just work my way through answering those questions. So Brendan asks about the locations in the list view. Obviously, with the list view, you will be able to see the locations as well. So just be aware that in here, when you go to the list view, should really turn my synergetic connection off. It's quite slow. When you click on any of those events in the list view, you will be able to see all the details about where that event is and the location as well. That might be an issue that it's not there at the moment, but I think these events at the moment don't have any locations in them. So the location will show in that little pop-up box there as well, giving you more detail. A question on how many more months will remember me. That was going to be 6 months by default, so it will remember me for 6 months. That probably we may make configurable in the future if people express interest in configuring that, but by default it's just been set to 6 months at the moment. So just be aware of that. We figured that was a fairly standard amount of time, but obviously you need to be aware of the implications of that, especially on public computers, but in environments where it's mainly BYOD or one-to-one, you can probably safely turn that Remember Me option on and it will just get out of people's way and they won't ever have to log in again, giving them effectively single sign-on, which is good. So Sean's asked, can you drag and drop into the resource browser? So I'll just demonstrate that as well. So in the resource browser, we have this new view in here. Obviously, everyone's familiar with this. There's been a few improvements in this area as well. One of the things that was a pet peeve to me was that on small screens, the folders used to wrap around and get all unorganized. As of this update, that no longer happens. We now can handle that gracefully. So on iPad screens and things like that, when you've got large folder names, the system will handle that with a scroll bar down the bottom, so you can scroll between them. I should point out, be aware on iPads that when you're scrolling around in this area, it is easy to move files because obviously the click and drag action is the same as the scroll action on the iPad. So just be careful with that area. Generally, it's not too much problem if your users don't have permissions all over the place, because generally it won't just randomly move something. But for super users out there, it can be easy to randomly just drop something into another location by accidentally dragging across an iPad. In terms of drag and drop here, you'll see that I'm selected on a folder here, English. I can once again bring up my file copy. And whoops, let me just select a file. I can drag that file in. This whole area where the English and the no files displayed area becomes droppable, so it's fairly easy to hit. I drop that file and it updates to put that image there, so not a problem there as well. Obviously that allows multi-files. It's a bit hard for me to demonstrate multi-file upload, but you can grab a whole folder worth of files and drag them into there. Just be aware that you still can't drag and drop folders, but if you do drop a folder, it will just drop the files that are inside that folder into this area as well, but it won't create a new folder for you. So there's a question whether the export function on the calendar has changed. Can a student stream their Hive calendar to their iPad? That's always been the case. The export function has always allowed the ability to stream the calendar to their iPad. The only thing that you can't do via that stream is obviously write back. So there's no way to write back currently from the iPad into Schoolbox, but of course you can use the export function to connect to your iPad device. To do that, it's simply a matter of going into the calendar, selecting the export button, and then selecting which events that you want to place in your iPad. So generally it would be all events. You click generate URL, and that will give you a URL that you put into your iPad under calendar subscriptions. So that's just a simple process. Once that's in there, all the events that are inside Schoolbox will also appear in your iCal program on your iPad device or in your Outlook or any of those other devices as well. We have extended the export function. Previously, it didn't include location and description. It now does. So you'll now find that there's more information included in that export function. So you'll find that additional location and description data also available through into the iPad devices. So when is the gold release for 14.5? Good question. So we do plan on making this gold in 2 weeks' time. So we plan to release it prior to the end of November. So expect to see that. We have currently tracking around 80 issues in the system that we're working through. We at a rate of about 40 or 50 issues a week. We're currently getting through them. So I'd expect currently, if we don't get too many more issues, that 2 week timeline will be good to go. So expect it to be gold in about 2 weeks, and that should be the expected date. Unless, of course, we get a whole lot of new issues come in, and then it could be delayed while we work through those issues. But in the meantime, we expect that to be within 2 weeks. So, next question, can you please show us how to add links to the images in the slideshow dashboard component? Okay, that's a good question. So there is a bit of a trick to the slideshow dashboard component. It is a bit involved, so I guess people are keen to see how that works. So this component here, the Hawaiian Night staff drinks links here. So you can just see those images directly there in the slideshow event. These can be made clickable. So at the moment they've got links through to wherever I want them to go. Now to set that up, I need to first find where this component is located. So in here, you'll find I have my image slider images. There's my 3 images that have been uploaded for this particular case. I can modify those and place in the description a URL. So if I wanted to put in a link to google.com, I just simply put that link in the description, and the system will automatically make that description the link that's associated with that file. So now if we return to the dashboard, the BYOD image will automatically link to Google. Okay. All right, next question. Can you add an image of a signature into a form? No, you can't currently add an image. You have to write it directly into the signature. So it needs to be your own handwritten signature. I believe it will take input from a stylus, also from a mouse, or your finger on a touchscreen. So any of those are perfectly acceptable ways to add your signature in. But just taking a photo of someone's signature and uploading that is probably not enough. Okay, do we have any other questions that anyone would like answered during this session? All right. Well, if that's all the questions that everyone has, and there's no more from Twitter, I'm hoping Sean's been monitoring Twitter. If there's no more questions, then we'll wrap up this session. Thank you everyone for coming along and having a look through the 14.5 features. I do encourage everyone to obviously read over the release notes. There is a lot more information in the release notes about this particular release, more than I can possibly go through today. There's lots of little bits and pieces, but I've managed to cover off most of the major features today that have been updated and how they work. But be sure to read through those minor updates, because there might be some things in there that particularly affect you. So it's important to go through those minors as well. As mentioned, we do plan to have this finalized within the next 2 weeks. We'll be sending out information in 2 weeks about the approval process for how to get the gold system into your servers. That will be a manual process, so you will need to contact us to request the gold release is updated on your system. We're expecting that most people will conduct that over the Christmas holidays, and that we'll have everyone up to date and ready to go for the new year in 2015. So thank you everyone for coming along again. It's been a good session. I've got no extra questions here. Oh, no, I do have. Everyone's taken the last minute opportunity to send in a few questions, so I'll just answer a few more of these questions. So firstly, when adding a file to Google Drive, do you need to log in? Yes, that's correct. The first time that you access the Google Drive, it will ask you to approve Schoolbox to access your Google Drive, so there needs the trust relationship built, but you also need to log into Google before you can approve Schoolbox to be able to access the Google Drive as well. So in terms of that workflow, what you can expect to see is that the user will first be asked to log in. Most users these days are logged in permanently in their browser, especially if they're using Chrome, but if they're not, they'll be asked to log in first. It will then ask them to approve Schoolbox, and once that process is done, it will then make the appropriate access and give you access to your drive. So yes, it's not single sign-on per se. You will need to log in first. Having said that, if you do have Google integrated into your SAML authentication and the users have logged into Schoolbox via SAML, it should all just automatically work and give them single sign-on access to their Google Drive. So there's quite a lot of things that obviously are involved in that process, and it does depend on how you set up. But it does support all the different options for how they may be authenticated first. Can the signature be exported into the Excel file was one of the questions that I've got here. Currently, no. Unfortunately, obviously, we export in CSV and it doesn't support a signature image. So we can't currently export that to CSV. All at the moment we do is we indicate whether they did sign or not. But we can't actually include the image in there. You can view the image of the signature, but it's not included in that export file, unfortunately. Okay, that about sums up the questions that everyone got in at the last minute. So thanks very much, everyone, and I'll see you all shortly, and I look forward to the gold release in 2 weeks, and thank you all for coming.